Good morning. We are back to the study of Between Heaven and Earth. As I do every month, I would like to start with catch up what we studied last month and a little bit of the story, because this book is the story goes based on what happened before, so we need to be up to date. So we studied chapter 32, where Mario, that went to attend Julio's nursing care in Amaro's home, becomes overwhelmed by an insuppressible feeling of hatred and vengeance. But remembering the evangelical teachings he learned in Antonina's home, he engages in a great internal struggle with his conscience. Mario, unconsciously emitting harmful fluids of hatred, which were carefully isolated from Julio by Clarencio, reluctantly waits for the boy to respond to the anti-diphtheric serum application. And then when an anaphylactic shock occurs, the young patient is declared beyond hope by the doctor. Mario, staying by the child's side throughout the night, notices Amaru's suffering and humbly regrets the feelings of vengeance he had harbored, giving thanks to God for not having poisoned the boy as he thought of doing. Amaru, resigned, takes his dying son and in fervent prayer surrenders him to God. Julio, now disincarnated, is taken in by Odila. Witnessing the child's death, Mario Silva, deeply moved and in convulsive tears, rushes onto the street, disoriented and in anguish. This mental state of Mario will be important for the studies of today. We are going to address them. Okay, and then on chapter 33, we just did the first part, which is Julio, now discarnated, is transported once again to the home of blessing, where he morally and physically he rehabilitated. He could now, in good health, prepares for a properly planned reincarnation with lofty service objectives. That's where we stopped. Just a reminder, Julio, together with Armando and Stevis, they were all connected to Lina, who is Zumira reincarnated. Julio committed suicide, tried to poison himself, failed, and then threw himself in the river and committed suicide. Amaro is Armando reincarnated. Esteves, who was first married to Lina, is Mario reincarnated, and Antonina is Lola Ibaruri, where who everybody was chasing in that previous incarnation. Okay, so now let me share the book. We stopped here where it says it was only natural. So Soraya, can you start reading from there?
Okay, sure. But where was Julio before he returned to the world, I asked. After having gotten rid of his own body, satisfying a mere personal whim, he suffered the sad consequences of his deliberate act for many years in the circles closest to the earth. He had to endure the torments of having poisoned himself, an act that was repeated over and over again in his mental field. Premature death, when it entails rebelliousness against the infinitely compassionate laws that govern us, compels the spirit to endure a lengthy purgation on the spiritual landscape. We cannot cheat time, and a planned-out existence is dependent on a preset amount of time, which we must fulfill by doing what we are supposed to be doing. When that amount of time isn't used adequately, we shoulder awful imbalances in our physical and spiritual makeup. Does such a spirit suffer by itself? Not always. If it doesn't find itself in tormenting loneliness, it does find itself wherever its thoughts keep it imprisoned. In response to our insatiable curiosity, he added, Julio's thoughts were nourished in the psychic atmosphere of Zumila, Amaro, and Silva, who acted as basic points for hatred. Jesus taught that people's treasures will be where their hearts are, and in fact, with our minds, we are drawn to persons, places, and objects that are connected to our sentiments. But was Julio in contact with them in the spirit world or in the experiences of the physical? He simply took part in their lives, and life in whatever sector of struggle is invariable. Nevertheless, by detesting Amaro the most, he weighed most intensely on him. During his stay in the spirit world, Amaro experienced Julio's relentless persecution, listening to his accusations and complaints in the purgatorial regions, and upon reincarnating in his current situation, he was closely followed by Julio, who afflicted his mind and demanded the necessary assistance to form a physical body. Due to Amaro's thoughtlessness when he was Armando, Julio took the route of the suicide. Consequently, the law allowed his union with his friend-made enemy, from whom Julio demanded renewal of a lost opportunity. Clarencio looked at us in a special way and added, the spiritual thread of the commitment always runs between the creditor and the debtor. So Amaro would have had a somewhat troubled childhood, I pondered with the objectives of study. Yes, as happens with most young people of both sexes in the daily struggle, he awakened too early to the ideal of parenthood. During dreams, while outside his dense body, he would find himself with his enemy who asked for his return to the world and eager for reconciliation. He thought about marriage with extreme restlessness, desirous of paying the debt he knew he owed. He was still very young when he met Odila, who had been waiting for him in keeping with the agreement both had made in the spirit world. However, Julio's vibrations were so uncomfortable that Odilia could not receive him right away and received Evelina first instead. Since the couple's connection with her was based on sweet affinities, only after Evelina's birth was Odilia ready to incorporate the suffering suicide.
Okay, thanks, Soraya.
You're welcome.
So some very interesting concepts here of what happens to us when we are in the spiritual world, carrying debts from our past and carrying disturbed, perturbed mind. Let's say perturbed is a better word, right? So we see that the question is, where was Julio before he incarnated? That's before he incarnated, the first incarnated as the son of Amaro that died drowning at 8 years old. So after he killed himself, he had to endure the torments of having poisoned himself. Again, our actions, when we make those mistakes that causes us to a lot of damage, we keep repeating them in our mind over and over again, which is very important, right? There is no external punishment. We are the ones who punish ourselves. So here he tried to kill himself by poison, couldn't, then he drowned. And of course, when he understands, even if it's not completely consciously, but even half consciously, that life continues, then he starts feeling guilty for having tried to kill himself and killing himself. So the sins keep playing over and over in his mind. Of course, our natural reaction to these happenings is to blame someone else, right? We have a very difficult time in blaming ourselves. We always try to find someone else to blame. So, of course, Julio killed himself because of Amaro. So he starts persecuting Amaro in a way, even semi-consciously. Clarencio says here we cannot cheat time, meaning if we commit suicide, we need to face the consequences. When the amount of time is unused adequately, we should shoulder the imbalances in our physical and spiritual makeup. And then when Andre Luiz asked if a spirit suffered by itself, Clarencio answers not always. If if it doesn't find itself in loneliness, in tormenting loneliness, it does find itself wherever its thoughts keep it imprisoned. So in Julio's case, its thoughts keep it imprisoned, hating Amaro, previously Armando, of course, right? So he was thinking of Zulmira, of Amaro, and Mario, who were, again, he was thinking about Lina, Armando, and Esteves, because they were not incarnated at the time, but that's the ones that he's trying to poison with his thought. Jesus says that where people's treasures are, their hearts will be. So when our minds are drawn to the persons, places, and objects that are connected to our sentiment, both positive and negative. Here we're thinking about negative, but think about it on the positive aspect, right? That's why prayer is so important. That's why we keep repeating that positive vibration, positive thoughts are so important, because our minds are drawn to these places that connect to our sentiment. So what Julio was doing, where he was in the spirit world, Amaro was feeling Julio's relentless persecution, again, Armando, and Armando was already feeling guilt when he was incarnated that Julio killed himself, if you remember. When Julio kills himself, Armando leaves Lina and moves back to Rio, gets married, and then end up killing by accident, killing Lina by going over her with a carriage, right? So Armando already carried the guilty feeling towards Julio. So when Julio starts persecuting him in the spiritual world, Armando is open to hear his accusations and complaints and decides to try to help him. And when he incarnates, he reincarnates, he decides to try to help Julio, even if he's not conscious in the physical body. He's in the subconscious. He wants to somehow help Julio, which is the friend-made enemy opportunity of repairing. The spiritual thread of commitment always run between creditor and debtor. So in his new incarnation, Amaro had a somewhat troubled childhood, Andre Luiz asked, and Clarencio answers that yes, with most young people of both sexes in the daily struggle, he very early had the desire of parenthood. He wanted to have kids, because outside the dance body, he would find himself with Julio, that was asking for his return, and he wanted reconciliation. So he wanted to get married. Eventually, when he meets Odila, who was not part of this past history, but it's a spirit connected to him, and they had an agreement to come back and to get together. So they get married, but it's very interesting. They cannot receive immediately Julio as a child, because his vibrations were so uncomfortable that Odila could not receive him. If we go back to Missionaries of the Light, the reincarnations of Segismundo, we remember that there is a whole process of Segismundo being reconciled with Adelino, his future father, because Adelino was poisoning the vibrations of the ambient and preventing Segismundo to reincarnate. So in this case here, Julio's own vibrations were so difficult that Odila could not receive him right away. So they had to put someone in between them as an intermediary, which was Evelina. So Evelina is born there to Amaro and Odila. So only after Evelina's birth, then Odila becomes better prepared to receive Julio, the suffering suicide. It's very interesting connections here. Okay, Elmo, anything to add here?
No, João.
Any questions? Okay,
Okay,
go on.
continue. This point in our conversation, I remarked respectfully, makes me remember the inner conflicts of many young people. They sometimes jump into marriage completely inept for its huge responsibilities, as if they were driven by unseen trusters, without any consideration whatsoever for the imperatives of prudence. As if they were assailed by sudden madness, they disregard all advice from family and friends, only to awaken later with serious problems, if not under a cloud of immense disillusionment. I can now see at the base of youthful dreams, there are nearly always anguishing depths that cannot be avoided. Yes, many love-related passions correspond to true obsessions or psychosis, which only reality can treat successfully. In many cases, behind the desire for marriage vibrates the past due to request by discarded friends or enemies to whom we owe assistance so that they too can reincarnate. Love can be the manifestation of dark labyrinths from the past. As I thought about the struggles of the soul thrown into life's experiences with so many enigmas to solve, I remembered an old question that often came to mind. What about guardian angels? I asked. Due to the surprise on Clarence's face, I clarified myself respectfully. Forgive me, but I am still just a beginning student of the spirit life. And there are guardian angels in our spheres? Are there guardian angels in our spheres? Clarenzo gazed at me in wonder and replied, guardian angels are found in all spheres. However, a few considerations are in order. Analyzed in their divine magnificence, angels of sublime vigilance follow us on the long road of evolution. They watch over us in accordance with the laws that govern us. But we mustn't forget that we are all move about in multidimensional circles. The chain of the Spirit's ascent goes from the depths of the abyss to the supreme heavenly glory. A brief pause brought a fatherly smile to his lips, and then he continued. We need to remember that we are shaping our imperishable individuality in space and time at the course of continuous, difficult experiences. The notion of a divinized and perfect being constantly at our side, available at our beck and call to answer our questions, does not square with justice. What earthly government would put one of us wisest as most specialized ministers who was in charge of ensuring everyone's well-being in the ongoing service of just one person who was almost always a stubborn cultivator of complex enigmas and thus in need of life's harshest lessons? Why would an archangel be obligated to descend from the light eternal to follow, step after step, a person who is deliberately selfish or lazy? Everything requires us to be logical and reasonable. So you mean to say that the guardian angels do not live with us? I am not saying that, he asserted, and he graciously added, even though it is millions of miles away, the sun is always helping the worm in its hole, even though the worm is not where the sun is. The two sisters at our side were enwrapped with their contemplation of the sky as they talked about Julio's future, mentally distant from our conversation. Clarence's lesson imposed serious reflections, and perhaps that is why silence had come over the group. But realizing the subject needed more clarification, he continued, an angel, according to the correct definition of the word, is a messenger. Now, there are messengers of all sorts of conditions and of all kinds of origins. Consequently, antiquity always believed in the existence of good and bad angels. Since the oldest religious ideas, a guardian angel is an expression that defines a heavenly spirit who watches over an individual in God's name? Or is it a person who is entirely devoted to another, helping and defending him or her? Whatever the spheres may be, the familiar spirits of our lives and struggles live with us. from the most brutish beings to the most sublimated. There is a chain of love whose links we may symbolize in souls who care for each other or who are attuned to each other within the infinite gradation of progress. The spirit family is a constellation of intelligences whose members are on earth and in heaven. The member who is able to see a little more helps the sight of the still struggling member to get rid of his or her blindness. All of us, no matter how low on the evolutionary scale, have someone nearby who loves us and drives us to go higher. We can see this most clearly in the circles of the densest matter. There are hearts that are constantly devoted to our esteem and well-being, and of all earthly affections. We would use a mother's devotion as the best example. The maternal spirit is a type of angel or messenger, although often circumscribed to the iron prison of selfishness as she watches over her children. Besides mothers, whose love suffers many deficiencies when confronted with the essential principles of fraternity and justice, there are individuals who devote to us the greatest affection and sympathy, and who are capable of the greatest sacrifices on our behalf, in spite of being conditioned to self-objectives. But we mustn't forget that the admirable altruism of tomorrow begins with the narrow affection of today, just as the oak starts with the acorn. All individuals count on the praiseworthy devotion of kindred spirits. There is no true orphanhood. In the name of love, all souls receive assistance wherever they may be. Older siblings help younger ones. Masters inspire disciplines. Parents help children. Friends are linked to friends. Colleagues help colleagues. This happens on every plane of nature and fatalistically on the earth amongst those who are still in the flesh and those who have crossed over into the dark gateway of death. The Greeks understood this and relied on their unseen geniuses. The Romans grasped it and worshipped their family numinats. Their guardian spirit is always a beneficent spirit for its worth. But we have to say that the tides of affection around us are still on an ascendant march toward the highest levels of life. With all the veneration we owe them, we have to realize that the familiar spirits that watch over us are great and respectable heroes of the good, but they are still very far from everlasting angelhood. Of course, they are evolving along ennoble lines on evolved planes, but they still feel individual inclinations and passions en route to the universalization of their sentiments. Thus, in the diverse religious schools, we need to heed the popular intuition asserting our guardian angels are different from each other. Or let's pray to our guardian angels, realizing instinctively that the familiar spirits of our private lives are still in the field of specific affinities, and they often have to appeal to a higher nature to render this or that type of service.
Thanks, Zoraida. Okay, very long passage here. So first, Andre Luiz and Clarencio talk a little bit about marriage, the commitments that young people feel the necessity to get married out of unconscious feeling, and in many cases is to redeem issues of the past, right? There is always anguishing that cannot be avoided at the base of youthful dreams. So, as Clarencio says, many love-related patients correspond to true obsessions or psychosis. So the marriage vibrates the past due to requests by discarnate friends or enemies. So that was just a little bit talking about the responsibilities and the challenges that young married couples face. But then there is a long study on guardian angels. And again, we study guardian angels or protecting spirit, right? Guardian angels is a word brought by from the other religions. We don't, in Spiritism, we learn there are no angels per se in the sense of beings created separated. We are all created equal, simple, and unaware. And on our path of evolution, we keep progressing, and there is the responsibility of more evolved spirits to take care of less evolved spirits, right? We discussed this on the Q&A last week, right? Rogerio asked if if you have to be a guardian angel, and I said no, not necessarily. You can do several different things in the spiritual world, but one of the things is when you love someone and you want to protect someone, you can be the guardian angel of this person. Again, we all have one guardian angel or one spirit responsible for ourselves from before the incarnation until after we go back to the spiritual world, and sometimes through several incarnations. We have the example of Emmanuel with Chico Xavier, right? But besides the guardian angel, the one responsible for us, we have the familial spirits also, the sympathetic spirits, those that want us to move forward, that wants to help us, that sometimes, as they say here, are not very evolved. Sometimes they are as evolved as we are, but they are willing to help us like we are here in the physical world. We want to help those around us, children, family members, friends, etc. So Andre Luiz asked about guardian angel, and Clarencio says that they follow us on the long road of evolution. They watch over us in accordance with the laws, but we move in multidimensional circles. That's very interesting. We think about the Earth and all the circles that surround Earth in terms of the spiritual world with different dimensions and different planes. We find the lower zones, we find not solar type of colonies, and the colonies even above not solar. The chain of the spirit ascent goes from the depths of the abyss to supreme heavenly glory, right? And then Andre Luiz asks, Clarencio says that we have to remember that they are not at our disposal 24/7, in the sense that they are not around us all the time. They are with us when we need them. But to imagine that they will be at our disposal 24/7 is a lack of understanding of the eternal laws. And the example he gives here, even though it's millions of miles away, the sun is always helping the worm in its hole, even though the worm is not where the sun is. Meaning, the guardian angel is always available to us, but we are not connected to it in the sense that when we are doing living our daily lives, they are not next to us. They are next to us when we really need. And then Clarencio continues talking about the guardian angel as a messenger, an angel as a messenger. And there are messengers of all sorts of conditions. And it comes from the antiquity, right? It's from antiquity. The guardian angel is an expression that defines a heavenly spirit who watches over an individual in God's name, or is a person who is entirely devoted to another, helping and defending him or her. But then we have the familiar spirits also in our lives that struggles with us. But the concept here is that nobody is alone. From the most less evolved to the most sublimated, there is a chain of love whose links symbolize in souls who care for each other. Meaning, the spirit family is a constellation of intelligence whose members are both incarnated and discarnated. And we are always trying to help each other. So all of us, no matter how low on the evolutionary scale, have someone nearby that loves us and wants us to improve. And then he brings the example of a mother to make it more palpable to us. So the maternal spirit, is a type of angel or messenger, although sometimes it's circumscribed to the iron prison of selfishness, meaning, a mother is always in most cases want to protect their children, but she's thinking about herself in somehow with some sort of selfishness, depending on each mother, right? And then goes on saying, all souls receive assistance wherever may be. Older siblings help younger one, masters inspire disciples, parents help children, friends help friends, colleagues help colleagues. That happens in every plane of nature and between those that are incarnated and those that are discarnated. So the guardian spirit is always a beneficent spirit for its ward. But the ties of affection around us also plays a part in it. We have to realize that our familiar spirits that watch over us are great and respectable heroes of the good in the sense they are trying to help us, but they are far from angelhood. So they have their own limitations, their own inferior tendencies, and then he talks about how guardians, angels are different from each other. We are all spirits on the path of evolution, so we are all spirits that are struggling to overcome our imperfections. But I think that if you're looking for the true definition and understanding of a guardian angel, besides the questions on the Spirit's book, this is where you find on this explanation by Clarencio. Okay, anything to add here?
The issue of the marriage places so many questions, at least in my mind, which I don't think I have the answer. It's more philosophical, I think. We see marriages that individuals kind of rush into it. We see relationships that are abusive, but it hangs on, it keeps on going besides the abuse, and we can only reflect and think what's the past, the atavism, the responsibilities from past lives that keep those individuals together, besides not being happy and even being kind of cruel to one another. Why does it persist? And us from the outside very quickly to judge and say, why is she tolerating this? Why is he taking that? Why can't it just go ahead and divorce if that the relationships of the past play such a strong role that binds those individuals together until they are able to resolve the issues, and then is it the way it should be? Now that we have the possibility of separating what's not working properly, should it persist and not make the separation based on this possibility of responsibilities of the past? I don't have an absolute answer. I'm living clearly that I'm all favor and pro-divorce when the union is not satisfying to both, then might as well break apart and seek happiness somewhere else. But all those questions comes to our mind when we read this passage now here.
Yeah, we know that many marriages are readjustments from the past, right? So two people that have to readjust with each other. And again, we'll talk about any stable unions here, right? But many times, what they need to go through is to stay together for some time and work together to overcome their differences, and then that's the end of their necessity. But in most of the cases, it ends up sometimes aggravating the circumstances or breaking up before they are able to solve the issues they were supposed to solve. So it just carries on for next incarnation, right? Okay.
Okay.
And the guardian angels, everything good?
Regarding Andrew, I think anyone should review what's in the Spirit book and take the Spirit's book as the basis for our understanding of the guardian angel. But it's good that Clarence take away this idea that the guardian angel is someone almost like attached to you, telling you what to do and not to do all the time. And remember that we have our conscience, our free will, and our intelligence to use. And when you try to use those three things together, the guardian angel is back there to back us up. But the decision is always ours. The guardian angel is not responsible for our lives. They have their own lives to deal with.
Yes. Thanks. Okay, Sarado.
Okay, we continue. We arrived at the Bacau, and the instructor's explanation was imprinted in our souls as an unforgettable lesson, compelling us to silence. Landina, however, asked Clarenzo, "Kind friend, can we be sure that Julio was supposed to discarnate now?" "Absolutely. The law has functioned precisely. There is no room for any doubt." "What about those streams of dark thought from Mario that seemed to poison him? If we hadn't been with him, he would have hastened the boy's death. Even so, the law would have been fulfilled. However, Mario's dark thoughts turned against him. He admitted them with the obvious purpose of murder. Hence, he is experiencing the remorse of an actual murderer." Landina's gracious residence was now in sight. Clarenzo embraced her and concluded, "We can be sure, my daughter, that wherever and whenever we will receive from life according to our own deeds."
Okay, not much here. Is just and Blandina asking if Julio was supposed to discarnate now. Clarencio confirming that was his time. Yes, that he had to go through the experience again, but that Mario's dark thought that tried to poison and cause the boy's death was prevented by Clarencio, just delayed a little bit. The boy discarnated anyway, but Mario's conscience, dark thought, turned against him. So again, our thoughts is what really matters to us, what carries the consequences for ourselves. So eventually the boy died, so Mario is carrying this guilty conscience that a murder carries, the remorse of an actual murder. Okay, that's it for this chapter. Any questions here? Okay, so the new chapter, An Endeavor of Assistance.
Okay. The following evening, we were unexpectedly visited by Odilia, who asked for our help. Now that our concerned friend was aware of the dark drama that had played out in the recent past, to better understand the troubles of the present, she understood the needs of Amario and Julio, whom she loved as husband and son of her heart. She was asking us to help her with Zumila, who was once again bewritten. Answering Evelina's appeals, she had returned to her former home to encourage the one who had succeeded her in running the home. Now she was back and was troubled. Zumila was severely depressed. She was refusing to take her medicine, and she wouldn't eat. She was weakening dreadfully. Odilia now understood that Zumila's permanence in the world and in the flesh was exceptionally important to her family group, and with that in mind, she was asking for our help. This brief information was urgent and moving due to the tone of the loving affection in which it was given. We did not hesitate to respond. It was past midnight in the city when we went through the welcoming door of Amaro's home, which had so long been an invaluable point of activities for us. Her mind fixated on the final moments of Julio's death. Zumila lay in bed in deplorable prostration. She had grown alarmingly thin. Bags under her sunken eyes were a stark contrast to the paleness of a disfigured face. She had fallen back into her former retrospection. She was dwelling on Julio's drowning and unaware of the fact that she had received him back into her arms as her own blessed son. She felt like a wrench defendant facing a court of justice. Obviously, she thought for long she was suffering divine punishment, just when everything led her to believe that the boy would grow up as a blessing for her home, according to expectations. His death was a dolorous punishment imposed on her maternal heart. She must have been sentenced by the judges of heavenly wisdom. No one on the earth knew about her remorse for having been a careless, cruel guardian, but she had obviously been recognized as such by the thousand-eyed tribunals of incorruptible law. She hadn't helped Odelia's son as she should have, but had intentionally abandoned him. Now she had inexplicably lost a son who was to have fulfilled her hopes for a bright future. Was it really worth it to get up and face what for her represented the pain of living? She could see she was beaten. The guilt complex had retaken her mind and had smitten her heart. There were several types of medication on the nightstand. Our instructor noted them, examined the patient and said, the pharmacy doesn't have the medicine that Zumila needs. It has to come from within her. We need to renew her hopes and her love for life. Her mind is out of control again. She has lost all interest in the daily struggle, and her refusal to eat has led to progressive inanition. But if she could see the boy again, asked Hilario, wouldn't that be the best way to restore her to happiness? That was what we are hoping, agreed the minister. But at this stage, Julio needs at least 1 full week of complete rest. Until then, we obviously have to spare his energies. Lorenzo got to work applying magnetic resources with our humble help. Zumila's nervous tension, however, had reached its apogee. We could only calm her down somewhat, but not enough to induce her to repertorial sleep as we would have liked.
Okay, there is not much here for us to comment, right? Andre Luiz is just describing the state of Zulmira's mind that, it's understandable. She, in her mind, she allowed Julio to drown, being careless. She feels guilty to have caused the death of Odila's son, Julio. Then she receives a new boy, and the boy dies very early. So she has all, looking from her perspective, she has all the right reasons to be severely depressed and to be despondent about life. So her reaction was to refuse to eat, refuse to take medicine, and she was, very thin, with pale and with bags under the eyes. She, went back to introspection, reminding herself that she was guilty, that she was being punished by some divine tribunal, that because of her carelessness. And Clarencio says, the guilt has completely retaken her mind and it's gone to her heart. So how can you address a patient like that? Clarencio says that the medicine, the pharmacy, doesn't have what she needs because it has to come from within her. She doesn't have any physical problems that need medicine. She has an internal weakness of the mind. So she needs to renew her hopes and her love for life. It's upon her. So her daily struggle and refusal to eat had led to her inanition, which is the exhausted condition that results from lack of food and water. And then Hilario asks, if she sees the boy again, would she be able to be happy again? And Clarencio says that's what we're hoping, but at this moment Julio is resting, so she cannot see him. He needs at least 1 full week of rest, and they need to take care of her until she can meet with him. And Andre Luiz mentions that we could only calm her down somehow, but not induce her to the reparatory sleep, because if they could make her sleep, then they could at least talk to her in the spiritual world and maybe infuse her with a little more willingness to live and with a little more hope. Okay. Any comments here? Not much, right? Stay here. Okay. You're on mute, Elmo.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. We have a tendency to believe that our loved ones will go back home, are always ready to assist us, to be there for us. And that's a good reminder that, not always. Sometimes our loved ones need their own time for recovery, need their own time to be able to, even to understand the situation and to receive the help that they need. Would be nice if they could use Julio at this moment, but he's basically not available as yet.
Okay. Thanks. Zoraida?
Yes. Odilia felt more capable of taking care of her when we were confronted by an unforeseen phenomenon. Mario Silva, outside his dense body, entered the room like a flash of lightning. His haggard eyes had a wild look in them as he contemplated the patient for a few moments and then left. We looked questionably at the minister, who explained, "Everyone knows that the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. Remorse is a power that shackles us to the past." And because we wanted to go after the unexpected visitor, the instructor replied, "Let's just wait a bit. Mario will be back." In fact, a few minutes later, Silva did return with the same demented expression. He stared at the patient, but this time he got down on his knees, exclaiming, "Forgive me, please forgive me. I'm a murderer, a murderer." Instinctively, we were about to help him, but touched by the waves of a magnetic influence, the healthcare worker vanished. "Poor friend," said the minister, saddened. "He's suffering a lot. Let's help him." In a flash, we were at Mario's house. He was having a nightmare, confined to bed as a result of powerful sedatives.
Okay, so Odila was there taking care of Zulmira. She was capable of doing that now. Suddenly, Mario appears. Mario outside his physical body. So Mario was sleeping and he goes there like he was in a nightmare, right? And Clarencio says, the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. What does it mean is that we cannot erase the scene of the crime from our mind. So we keep going back there, either physically or spiritually. That remorse is a power that shackles us to the past. So Mario cannot overcome the feeling that he killed Julio. So he keeps going back. He goes back there. He asks for forgiveness to Zulmira. That remember, he wanted vengeance against her and Amaro, and now he wants her forgiveness as saying that he's a murderer. And Clarencio is sad by what he sees, and say that let's go and help him. They go to Mario's house in a flash, meaning they think about Mario's house and they are there. He was having a nightmare, okay, and he had taken some sedatives. Okay. Any comments, questions here?
Okay.
Yeah, I just think that's a very important reaffirmation that punishment is self-imposed. Who is punishing Mario here? Who is pointing fingers at Mario? I think everyone outside of Mario know that he is not responsible for that death, right? Besides his own thought. So I think it's a very important reaffirmation of how this divine law works, that we judge ourselves and we punish ourselves very often unnecessarily.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because nobody is accusing him of anything, right? He's the only one accusing himself. That's how our mind really plays the most important role in our lives. Okay.
Okay. We were surprised to see a discarnate nun praying nearby. She stopped praying in order to greet us warmly. I just knew, she said kindly and confidently, that our Lord would send us the help we needed. I have been watching over him for a few hours now, our friend's situation, and she nodded toward Mario lying in bed, is obviously abnormal, and I fear that he may be attracting diabolical spirits. Lorenzo assumed the look of a mere visitor in the eyes of the nun, who obviously felt encouraged by our presence. Are you a nun? Are you a nurse? Asked our instructor politely. Not exactly, but I do work at the same hospital as Silva. She gazed at the half-asleep Mario and added compassionately, he's truly devoted to helping sick children, and we owe a lot to his diligence and caring. And speaking like a true Roman Catholic, she continued, many blessed souls have come down from heaven to show how grateful they are to him. This has happened so many times that along with a few other physicians and assistants, he has merited the best attention of our sisterhood. Displaying his usual tact, Lorenzo asked, how did you know that our friend here was so distraught? We didn't receive any direct notification, but when he didn't come to work today, that was enough to tell us that something serious had happened. Our superior gave me the job of finding out what it was. My hands are tied because I had no idea there were so many spirits of the darkness in the vicinity. The nun's words were so full of spontaneous goodness and had evidence of such a charming, naive, and pure faith. But curiosity needled me inside. The temptation to study the fascinating issue of that charitable effort of assistance urged me to get involved in the matter. But one look from Clarencio was enough for Hilario and me to keep respectfully quiet. It's truly moving when one thinks about the sublimity of your mission after leaving your earthly body, said the minister kindly, perhaps trying to elicit a little direct elucidation capable of satisfying our curiosity. Yes, it is. We work under the supervision of Mother Paula, who has explained to us that nursing in public hospitals is a form of benign purgatory until we merit new blessings from God. But sister, I can see right now that your heart is partaking of the Lord's peace. She lowered her eyes humbly and replied, I don't think so. I'm just a poor nun working to redeem my sins. Mario lay mourning on the bed. The minister seemed to become unconcerned about any personal conversation and began to caress the patient's forehead, as if to inform us that the patient alone should be the focus of our interest. The nun approached our instructor respectfully and said, Brother, Mother Paula says that the ears of God live in the hearts of great souls. I'm certain that you heard my prayers, and I see you as being missionaries from the heavenly court. So I feel it's my duty to entrust our patient to you. Clarenzo thanked her and explained that we were only going to be there long enough to administer the help that Mario needed. The nun said that she had to inform the hospital about Mario's condition and promised she would return shortly. She rushed out. Now we were alone. Lorenzo explained, although still attentive to Mario, our sister belongs to a sister group of Catholic servants devoted to evangelical charity. There are several such institutions where countless spirits are gradually prepared for higher understanding. Under the supervision of authorities still connected to the Catholic Church? Asked Hilario in amazement. Why not? All religious denominations are of great worth in the spirit world. Like what happens with the human personality, belief systems have a clear, luminous region and another that is still in the dark. In our souls, the lucid region is nourished by our higher sentiments, whereas in the shadow world of our inferior experiences dwell inclinations and impulses that still chain us to animality. In religions, the field of sublimation is populated by benevolent and liberal spirits that are aware of our destination toward the good, whereas in the dark ranks of ignorance swamp souls weighed down with hatred and selfishness. And smiling, the minister added, we are still evolving, and each one of us lives at his or her proper level. But like us, did she grasp the truth we have been confronted with after death? I asked, intrigued. Each intelligence, he replied enigmatically, only receives the amount of truth that it can handle. On the bed, Silver was showing unmistakable signs of enormous anguish. I was aware of the fact that my job of assisting him was urgent, but the spiritual charm of the nun, who was remarkably bound to earthly customs, aroused my curiosity so much that I could not help but ask, but that nun knows that she has left the world behind. She knows she has discarnate, yet she sees herself as she used to be. Yes, she does. Does she know that life extends to other spheres, other realms, and other worlds? Will she finally realize that heaven and hell begin within ourselves? Lorenzo shook his head and replied, no, she doesn't seem like someone who has broken out of the circle of her own ideas in order to discover the surprises that universe holds in store. Mentally, she is still bound to the concepts she chose while on earth as being the most suitable to her happiness. And no one around here bothers her for living so far from the truth knowledge of the path. The instructor gave me a look of paternal charity and replied, above all, our sister deserves our greatest veneration for the good she is doing. As for the way to interpret life, we mustn't forget that God is our Father. With the same tolerance with which he has been waiting for us to have a higher understanding, he will wait for her to have it too. Each spirit has different pathway to travel, just as each world has the course peculiar to it. And gazing at me with particular attention, he observed, the main lesson here, Andre, is that of the soul who inevitably produces. As a healthcare worker, Mario Silva, despite his ruinous impulsivity, has been invaluable and humane and has become a creditor of another's love. As we have seen, he isn't a man devoted to religious endeavors. He is angry and aggressive. Lately has been feeling like a criminal. Still, he is rightly fulfilling the obligations he has assumed in life and knows how to be patient and charitable as he does so. Consequently, he has won the sympathy of many and is fraternally watched over by a grateful nun.
Thanks, Zoraida. There is so much here to go over, right? And I think it's so interesting, because there is a question that those that start studying spiritism or study spiritism ask a lot, which is, why the spirits arriving back in the spiritual world do not embrace the concepts of reincarnation, of eternity, of things like that. And in the case of this nun, a very nice and a person, a very nice spirit that is there to help and to work, we understand a little better what happens to many of us when we go back to the spiritual world. So they arrive there. There is this discarnate nun, again, praying. And she's thankful that they arrive. First thing important here, Clarencio assumed the look of a mere visitor in the eyes of the nun. Okay, so he presents himself as a visitor, not as, emitting the light that he naturally carries. He doesn't want to overwhelm her and make her afraid or retrieve in her own sentiment of inferiority in the presence of she could see him as an angel, like the Catholics believe, right? And that would only prevent him from being more efficient. So he assumed the look of a mere visitor in her eyes and asks her if she's a nurse. And she says no, she works at the hospital, helping, assisting from the spiritual world, and she admires Mario a lot because he does a very nice work helping sick children. And then she says, thank God you came. The heaven had sent you had sent you to help. And then she explains why she was there, that he missed the work, and she was concerned and asked for the superior. She's a nun. She works in a convent in the spiritual world. So the mother Paula was her superior, and asked her to go and help him find out what's going to happen to him. When she arrives there is a lot of dark spirits, inferior spirits in the vicinity that she can see, because Mario's inferior thoughts attract inferior spirits, of course. Mario is in very dark thoughts, and he, of course, attracts the spirit. And Andre Luiz was very surprised with the nun. So he says that she was such a charm, naive, and pure faith, and he couldn't control himself. You know, he was fascinated and wanted to ask. But Clarencio looked at him and Hilario, and with his look, he kept them quiet, right? And then he talks a little bit of with her. Mario is still only in bed, and then she says about her superior mother Paula, that they heard her prayer, God heard her prayers and sent emissaries of the heavenly court. So she leaves Mario with them, and goes back to the hospital to present the case to her superiors, and that said that she returned soon, and when she leaves, immediately Andre Luiz and Hilario want to know what's the story of the nun. And Clarencio explains that she belongs to a spirit group of Catholic servants devoted to evangelical charities. And that there are several such institutions where countless spirits are gradually prepared for higher understanding. So you are part of an institution here, serving devotedly to the institution. You go back to the spiritual world, you continue to work for a similar institution to the other side. Again, it's reasonable, it's logic. And Hilario asks, but they're still connected to the Catholic Church? And Clarencio says, why not? You know, all religious denominations are of great worth in the spirit world. It's a continuation of the work they do here. Belief systems have a clear, luminous region and another that is still in the dark. So all institutions have their, remember, we are a bad copy of the spiritual world. So the religious institutions here are a reflection of better religious institutions in the spirit world, where those that are involved and truly believe in the work through that institution can continue their work there in the spiritual world. In our souls, the lucid region is nourished by our highest sentiments, where the shadow world of our inferior experiences dwell inclinations and impulses that still chain us to animality, to the physical world. And then he says, in religions, the field of sublimation is populated by benevolent and liberal spirits that are aware of our destination toward the good, where in the dark ranks the ignorant swarm souls weighted down by hatred and selfishness. So what he's saying is, we shouldn't find it odd that in the spiritual world we have organizations exactly like we see in the physical world. Again, a very religious person that had dedicated their life to the religion they profess, if they go back to the spiritual world, it will be only fair, if they deserve, to continue having the opportunity to work on with they were happily working here on earth. Again, we have our free will, we make our choices, but the opportunity to continue to do the work that we do here, if it's a positive, uplifting work, it's an opportunity that we'll continue to have in the spiritual world. And of course, Andre Luiz asked, well, but isn't she faced with the truth that we all face after death? And then Clarencio says very wisely that each intelligence only receives the amount of truth that it can handle. That's a very important point that we keep repeating that Spiritism teaches us. It's not a matter of lying, no. It's a matter of giving the amount of truth that the person is prepared to receive. Too much light can blind the person. So if she receives all these notions of eternal life, of reincarnation, and everything, it's going to be too much for her. It's only going to disturb her. It's better that she goes gradually evolving and doing the work that she likes to do and she's comfortable doing, and she will acquire the knowledge as she goes. But Andre Luiz keeps asking, but she knows that she left the world behind. She knows she's discarnated. So she continues to see as she was in the where she was incarnated. And Clarencio very directly, yes, she does. Andrea keeps asking, does she know that the life extends to other spheres, other realms? Will she finally realize that heaven and hell begin within ourselves? And Clarencio, directly, no. She doesn't seem like someone who has broken out of the circle of her own ideas in order to discover the surprises that the universe holds in store. She is still bound to the concepts she chose while on Earth as being the most suitable to her happiness. If she's happy doing the work that she's doing, happy, and she's not causing harm to anyone, on the contrary, she's helping, why would we disturb her with concepts that she's not prepared to deal with? So the harmony of the universe and the universal, the divine law, is the one that keeps us learning on a need-to-know basis as we are prepared to deal with it. She's happy with the work and she's doing a nice work. Why impose some truth on her that she's not yet prepared to receive and that's going to disturb her more than help? And Andre Luiz says, no one here bothers her, so far from the true knowledge. And Andre Luiz and Clarencio answers, our sister deserves our greatest veneration for the good that she's doing. As for the way to interpret life, we must forget that God is our Father. He is tolerant towards each one of us, and until we have a better understanding, and she also will have time to have a better understanding. Each spirit has a different pathway to travel. So she is doing what is she supposed to do, and we should respect and allow her to continue doing her work. And then finally, he talks a little bit of Mario Silva, which is a very interesting thing, right? We see someone immersed in guilt, thinking that he's a murderer, but he's an invaluable and humane person doing a very good work at the hospital, fulfilling the obligations he has assumed in life, being patient and charitable with all the people he works at the hospital. So with that, he wants the sympathy of many and is fraternally watched over by a grateful nun that works in the hospital. So I think it's so important for us to think about what we just read about the explanations Clarencio gives about the nun and how to respect each other person's time and evolutionary path, right? Right, Elmo? Mute, Elmo.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's a humbling message for us spiritists to keep in mind that our intellectual knowledge that we gain from this doctrine is useful, it's extremely important. You need to evolve on both wings. But the moral value is much greater. The practice of charity by far supersedes all the intellectual understanding. What this woman is doing is out of her heart and out of her brain. She doesn't know as much as we do, but she practices the teachings of Jesus. And that carries by far the greatest weight. The intellectual will come eventually. And it's absolutely important that you understand that our sister deserves our greatest veneration for the good work she's doing. And we see amongst Spiritism the admiration that we have for many outside of the Spiritist doctrine, like Irmã Dulce, like Mother Teresa, like Mandela, individuals who never studied Spiritism, perhaps would absolutely deny and be against it. We know Irmã Dulce wasn't, but what they are doing is what really matters. Their work is what really matters. And the intellectual progress will eventually come. This week we have a very interesting we receive a spirit, very interesting case from one of those African religions, Orishas and Candomblé, I think, that was sent to our center by his leader, or her leader, I think it was his leader, because he got to a point that now he was too attached to the offerings, to the material offerings that in those rituals the incarnate offer to the spirits in exchange of assistance. And that spirit was too attached to those offerings and have progressed to a point where he was now in need to go that step up and understand, to start to be detached to soul of those offerings. So he was sent to us. And two important lessons for that are associated here. One is that there is a system that will let us know when you are ready for the next lesson. It may be your boss, it may be your leader, it may be yourself with your questionings, you start to question things. In his case, his boss told him, oh no, you need to take a break from this work right now, and we're way too attached to the offerings. Go see these people. And he came to us. And we had a very interesting conversation. So there is a system that will provide the opportunity for the intellectual growth. But more important, the work. And the lesson for us here is to be very careful when we look down at other religions, doctrines, that we put ourselves, unfortunately, I had noticed some of that in a complex of superiority. They were no better than anyone. And that spirits can basically accusing us that we don't like them, that we put them down, that we think they are better than them because the way they practice their work associated with the rituals. And the work that actually him and his team in the spiritual does is to help the separation of spirits and bad spirits from the physical bodies after death. That we as the spirits recognize be absolutely wonderful, beautiful work they are doing, but they have the impression that we look them down, that we don't give them the proper value. So I think it's upon us, spirituals, to reflect on those messages and see how we individually, forget about the others, we individually see ourselves in relation to others and others in relation to us, and understand the necessity, the importance of everyone doing their work wherever stage we find ourselves. That individual doing that wonderful work with all the rituals that we disagree with all the kind of exchanging offerings, things that we disagree with, but doing a work that is extremely important, assisting for the spirits, in the process of separation from the physical body. So this nun is doing the work where she is right now. She deserves absolute veneration. She does not have an understanding that we had. She was not being exposed to all the knowledge that we are being exposed to. If she's exposed, let's say, acutely to those understandings, would derail her entire world, would stop her from being productive. And we need to recognize that. There is a time for everything. That as long as you're doing your work assigned to you, assisting, doing good for humanity, you are just as good as anyone else, regardless of the intellectual and knowledge they have acquired.
Yeah. I think it's a great example. Yes, we need to reflect on it and understand the importance of. Sometimes we're dismissive of religions, and we need to understand the importance of religions. Again, the true concept of the religions, not the practice that humans distorting the concepts of religion do here, but the true value of spiritual value of the religions, how important they are in the spirit world also, as Clarencio mentions here. Okay, let's try to finish.
Yes. This lesson was truly moving. I was getting ready to comment on it, but Silva began moaning. The minister leaned over him and examined him at length. Then he stood up and stated, "Poor friend, he still can't get over Julio's death and is suffering from a troubling guilt complex. His thought is connected to the boy like an image on a photographic negative. He has spent the whole day in bed extremely troubled. I can see that he did not go to Antonina's home as he had planned. He feels defeated and ashamed of himself. However, Antonina's is the only one who has the medicine he needs." After a brief pause, we asked if it wouldn't be possible for us to help him more effectively by means of passes, to which Clarencio responded confidently. That type of help would strengthen his energy, but it wouldn't solve the problem. Silva needs a chance of attitude in order to get better. He needs fresh thoughts, and for now, Antonina is the only person capable of getting him back on his feet. I instinctively recalled the drama that had occurred at the time of the war with Paraguay and thought I was hearing the former Leonardo Paez story all over again. Nodding my thoughts, the minister responded, "Everything in life has its reason for being. In the past, Silva, as Estevez, got involved with Antonina, who was Lola Ibarrue, so that they could indulge in sinful pleasure by neglecting the finest obligations of life. In the present, they will be brought back together to make amends. Those who thoughtlessly associate with each other in the eyes of the law wind up expounding huge debts that have been paid off. No one can fool the principles that govern existence." I wanted to ask more questions, but Clarencio kindly put his finger to my lips and suggested, "Enough curiosity, Andre. When we begin to discuss the law, our conversation takes on the flavor of eternity, whereas the imposition of being of service conditions us to present minute." Indicating the troubled heart care worker, he said, "We will return tomorrow afternoon to take him to Antonina's. With her help, he will be able to get back on his feet. There's nothing more we can do for him right now." A few instances later, the nun came back with another sister who greeted us with attentive reserve, but had been given the job of helping their sick worker. The sisterhood would be responsible for all duties of watch care and spiritual nursing for as long as the Silva was in such a state. After a brief chat, we respectfully said goodbye and left, promising to return the next day.
Okay, so then we focus on Mario, right? He's still sleeping in a troubled state with nightmares. And Clarencio mentions that he's so connected to the boy, to Julio, that his mind cannot go anywhere else. And he didn't go. He was supposed to go to Antonina's home. He didn't, because he's feeling ashamed of himself and feeling defeated. And he says Antonina is the only one who has the medicine he needs. And Clarencio asked, "But couldn't we give him passes?" Sorry, Andre Luiz asked Clarencio, and Clarencio says, "This type of help would strengthen his energies, but wouldn't solve the problem." Again, we think about passes. Passes gives us strength, give us the balance, but doesn't solve the problem. We need to solve the problem. Mario needs to change a change of attitude, and Antonina is the only person capable of getting back on his feet. So because he would see her and he would then change his attitude. And then he talks a little bit about the war, Paraguayan War, right? That Silva, Mario was Esteves, was involved with Antonina, was Lola, and they left some adjustment to bring back to this life that will reunite them. And then Andre Luiz wanted to ask more questions, but Clarencio said, enough. Our conversation takes on the flavor of eternity, whereas the imposition of being of service conditions us to the present minute. We may have discussions of intellectual value, but the necessities of taking care of things around us is more important at the moment. That's what Clarencio is reinforcing with Andre Luiz. And they say that he says they will return tomorrow. The nun comes back with another nun, and they are going to be there helping Mario. Again, we are never alone when we deserve help and assistance. They will take care of the sick co-worker. And then they leave and said they will return the next day. Okay, and that's the end of the chapter. And that's the end for us. Any additional comments, questions? Elmo, anything to say here? No.
No, thanks.
Okay, so with next month, we will start with moral reconstruction. Okay. Couple of announcements before we go to our final prayer. Tomorrow is Labor Day, so SGNY will be closed. We won't have our regular Monday fraternal assistance meeting. Okay. The Spiritist Group of Connecticut, their weekly study is moving to Tuesday at 7 p.m. So they are studying the Gospel according to Spiritism and the book Our Daily Bread. They were doing at noon on Thursdays. Starting this Tuesday, they are starting to do a Tuesday at 7 p.m. So now our meetings are always at 7 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, the Spiritist Group of Connecticut, Wednesday, the book club, and Thursday, the study of the Spirit's book. Okay? So we can go to a final prayer now, Carol.
Certainly. Thank you very much, John and Elmo. And Sarita, thank you for reading for us today and for everyone who is participating. Infinite Creator and Divine Providence, we give thanks again for the opportunity to be together as brothers and sisters for our studies of the book Between Heaven and Earth, chapter 33 and 34. Guardian angels and protector spirits are near to us, especially when we need timely and immediate assistance, not necessarily available 24/7, who would be tethered to us. Every plane of existence, there is a variety of assistance, care, and love, including the physical and spiritual worlds. We do have free will, and we do have consciousness to do the best we can. Our thoughts and actions are creating our future and a vibrational signature. Each spirit has a unique pathway and only receives the amount of truth it can handle as part of the universal law of moral progress. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, the counselors, the mediums, the workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all Spiritus centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. May we go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail. So be it.